Hey there, my name's Jake Berger, and this is my experience with ayahuasca. And I've just got some notes over here, so if you see me glancing over, that's what it's for. And I strongly encourage you, if there's some parts that you want to skip ahead to, depending on the length of this video, I don't cut or edit or anything. So there's going to be timestamps below in the description. Check that out if you want to just skip ahead or skip around. I'm just going to start from the beginning and tell you the entire story. But before I get into that, I'd like to just kind of give you a teaser about what the kind of the highlight reel. There was a 3-night ceremony. The first night I could envision that these big sepia colored worms were coming out of my entire chestal neck area. It wasn't out of a hole. It was out of my hole, coming kind of from my gut out there. Then that was pretty much it for this first night. It was really underwhelming because I had never done it before. On the second night, I took a regular dose and it was like this tingling massage feeling throughout my entire body that started to grow, and then eventually I vomited. And there was even more to that story. At one point, I was kind of out in the trees, and the trees felt like they were looming over me. And this isn't just some hallucination or anything. It was that's what I felt. And then another time, the roof that we were kind of outside, and there's a structure. It was the roof was pressing down on me. I could feel what people were thinking. It's almost I'll get into that later, but this was a whoa kind of moment. On the third night, also on the second night, I was laughing so much, uncontrolled laughter, so much that the entire other 11 people in the group also started to laugh from my laughter. And then on the third night, I was able to ask myself questions, and in my mind's eye there would be a symbolic answer like that. It was I'd ask a question and boom, this symbolic answer would just appear in this sepia color again. And so I'm just going to jump right into it right now. Like I said, if you want to skip ahead, go ahead, because I'm going to give the entire story of how I even got into this experience, right? It's not like I looked on the internet and da-da-da. Anyways, so how did I even come to this ayahuasca ceremony? Is that I was volunteering at a place in the countryside in a European country. And just for privacy, I'm going to kind of leave out some of the specifics. Anyways, I was volunteering on the countryside, and it was at a place that they hold meditation retreats and similar stuff like that. And this girl that was also volunteering there, we had started talking, and it was only us two besides the family. And she told me that they were doing an ayahuasca retreat. And I was like, okay, this is a must. And it's not because I had this hunger for it. I wasn't searching to do an ayahuasca retreat. What had happened is, years before, I had heard one of my role models had done ayahuasca, watched YouTube video, and kind of heard about his experience. And at the time, I wouldn't have been ready to take it. I just, looking back, you know how you kind of like, maybe if you've ever like lifted some weight or something, there's some weights that I couldn't have lifted when I was 2 years old that I could lift now. And it's the same with that. There's some things that happened during the experience that I would not have been able to deal with, or it would have been a completely different experience. So I'd watch that video of my role model telling his experience, and then I've watched a few others, and then just kind of let it go. Maybe a couple years later, I watched another video, or another person, I heard about it from another person, so I started watching some more videos. Let it go again. Another time, I was actually searching, like there's a lot of places in the Netherlands, and I was kind of looking, the reviews weren't that great, same with Berlin, a little bit shifty, and with a substance like this, it's so potent that I feel it's important to have a right environment for the setting. I'm just feeling hot here, so I'm gonna get naked. Anyways, so I wasn't even at that moment, I wasn't consciously searching or intending to do an ayahuasca retreat. It just showed up in front of me, right? And that's called serendipity almost, where everything just kind of flows into place. And for me, that's how I like to live my life. I don't like to, whenever I'm forcing something, things don't tend to work out so well for me. So here's this ayahuasca retreat, right? And I'm again looking at my notes, and there was the option to do 3 days, 1 day, or 2 or 1 days. And I just did the 3 because I was already in the area. I trusted the people I resonated with the people, and the prices was in such a way that it was, there was a deal for taking the 3-day retreat. So that's how I even came to the retreat. And I strongly believe that it's important to almost allow this experience, or have this complete, okay, I'm ready for it. Whereas a lot of people, and maybe it's different for you, but a lot of people, they almost think that this is going to be the solution to their problems. And the solution is never outside, right? There's no thing that I can take or do that's going to somehow magically, it's like a magic pill that we know that doesn't exist. If a person wants to be physically fit, they exercise a certain way. If they want to be flexible, they stretch or do yoga, right? There's always some kind of a personal action, responsibility that is required to reap the benefits. And so that's why I just allowed it to come to me, rather than like seeking out, oh God, I really want to do it, and then it almost creates that like seeking, and it almost creates a whole layer of neurosis around even doing the retreat. So then, and set and setting are very important, right? Like how a person thinks about doing a retreat, or how a person thinks about something, dramatically alters the experience. An example is that, we'll stick with like the spiritual realm, is that in some Native American Indian cultures, when a person first goes to the medicine man or the healer, the very first question this medicine man will ask is, it's like, do you think you can be healed? Do you think we can heal this? Right? So it's all, and then you almost have to start navigating any doubts that come up, or start to handle any doubts that would come up. And a more practical, like scientifically proven example is, at the end of this video, or I'll put it in the description, some links to sham knee surgeries. They've done 2 separate studies where they've proven that they put one control group where they did a normal knee surgery, and another experimental group where they did all of the same actions of what a knee surgery would be, except they didn't do anything in the knee. The surgeon did nothing. And both groups, like the real surgery group, did not have any more benefits than the sham surgery group. It was just the belief that this person had went through the procedure, so okay, of course I'm gonna be better. And they took data, not just like immediately after the surgery, but they put them all through the same recovery program, gave them all the same painkillers afterwards, and months later, when they were checking up on people, there was, again, the control group was not above, or did not recover better, or have any benefits better than the fake knee surgery group. Okay, and the same study has been done twice with a little bit different modifications. So, again, the belief of going into this experience is very important, right? How do you feel if you have some, I don't know if I should do this, da-da-da-da. Now there's a difference, right? And the day before, or like before we took the ayahuasca, of course there's a little bit of almost excitement. There's like this, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I know this is good for me, right? People call that anxiety. But there's an anxiety of like, I don't know how this is gonna happen, and I think things might turn out probably gonna be bad for me, right? There's a fear at the end of it. Whereas this was like an I don't know. Kind of like a roller coaster. I don't go on roller coasters, but people that do know that it's gonna be a thrilling ride, but they're gonna be safe at the end. It was the same, that was the kind of energy that we were feeling, which is, to me, is positive, because unless someone has, like, a person would have to have a massive amount of experience with psychedelics, or, I use that term because it's creating visions, would have to have a massive amount of experience with psychedelics to just be like, okay, yeah, let's do this. Because this can be an intense experience. Anyways, so the first night I had taken Rapé, which is unfortunately spelled rape. But so it's not so easy to Google. You almost have to use the accent mark on the word just to find anything, or like a lot of words around that word. So the first night the shaman, he was from Peru, and he almost he didn't call himself a shaman. And that's also very important, because one of my friends had been doing a lot of work in shamanistic rituals and and I asked him, like, what's one of the most important things before you do ceremony? And he said, just take note of how the shaman is acting. Is he kind of egotistical? Does he feel like he's powerful? Or is he humble? right? The shaman should he's a facilitator. He's not creating the thing. He doesn't have this all wizard power or anything. He's just there to guide. And that shows a tremendous amount of respect for this sacred medicine. And like I said, because I had known the people that were where the ceremony was taking place, I knew that the people that they would have gotten, the shaman that they would have gotten, would have had that same humility. And so that's another very important point. Because I had a friend who did a ceremony with someone who did have that egotistical, and it did not turn out well at all. For no one involved had a what I would say it was more like a sharp lesson. Let's just leave it at that. Instead of like healing, it was more like there was significant consequences. I mean, no one got killed or poorly injured, but it was just like I said, it was like a Mother Ayahuasca was teaching everyone there a lesson. So, Shaman was from Peru, and he didn't speak English. Fortunately, I speak a little bit of Spanish, and a lot of the words are, they're like ayahuasca, más, more. So it's pretty, and like I said, the communication, it's not like we're talking during the experience. He's mostly just like doing his thing, and everyone else is doing their own thing, right? This ain't like a picnic party wherever, how you doing? So it's okay that we didn't speak the same language. Of course, it helps to have a translator, and there was a person that could speak the local language as well as speak a little bit of English, and then she could speak fluent Spanish. So she could take his words, and then anything that I didn't understand, she could give me those little hints where I could then understand. So they were late getting to the first ceremony. They were driving and whatever. So we started late, and he went around the circle, did his, I'm not going to get into details, but we each had like our own, I think it's mapacho, which is like a tobacco. And there's no filter, and you don't inhale, you just almost use it to somehow prepare the mind or whatnot. And then he goes around the circle, prepares kind of the energy of what's going to happen. And then he went around and he asked everyone in the circle, because we all were laying down outside under this, I think it's called like, let me look it up what it's called. It's like I really want to, it's not called a gondola. Outside structure. Pergola, I think. It's like, it was like a rounded pergola. And then it had like a top like this, and then there was just like a hole in the middle, and then they had covered the hole with glass so you could see straight up through it. And then we were all lying down on that, on like the deck of the pergola, feet facing inwards, and we had enough distance between us where we didn't feel tight. We felt like we each had enough space, and it was next to, in nature, where we could go to the house if something dramatic happened. But it was in the trees, and then next to like an almost dry stream. And then they even had an outdoor bathroom that we could use. So that was kind of the setup, and then we were each responsible for our own like bedding. So I had a yoga mat, and then I mean it was pretty cold at night, so I had sweatpants and multiple layers of jacket. I think I had a hat on. Yeah, I had a hat on, gloves, and everyone was layered up like this. It was summer, but it was middle of August, but it still got cold in the area because, like I said, it was in nature. Plus, it was in a valley, so that cold air could kind of just sit in there. And blankets, and then so he goes around the circle, prepares it, and then he asks each person if we want rapé. Okay, my accent, I'm American, so I'm just gonna say rapé instead of rapé. So I tell him that I've only taken it one time before, and it was a microdose. And so I told him, just really, really, a small one. I don't want this to disrupt my ayahuasca experience, because even the microdose that I had taken before was like, it took me a while to recover from it. And I didn't want to have that like vulnerability going into this intense ayahuasca experience. And so I told him multiple times, like, pequito, which means pequeño means small, and pequito or pequeñito, I was like really, really small, muy pequeña. And still, like, he blows his stuff up the nostrils, like left, and then it's just like this, like it feels like fire. If you ever drank vodka or some kind of intense alcohol, right, it feels like fire snaking down into your stomach. This feels like fire snaking up to your head and then like kind of spiraling a little bit. Puts it in the left, and then once I kind of like recover from it, then it's the right one right away, and it's just like the next day he told me that he didn't give me a small scoop, he like gave me a big one. And what happened is, like, I started getting, what happens is my eyes started watering intensely. My nose starts watering. I sneeze out this powder, because rapé is like ashes plus mapacho ground down into a fine snuff, so powder, and then it's blown up the nose. It's not sniffed, they blow it up there so it doesn't get into the lungs. And yeah, it just like so much afterwards, my sinuses were so clear. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, and I just blowing my nose so much to get all this, it's really cleansing. Like, I got a lot of mucus out. And I think there was one other person that took it, and he had done it multiple times. So it was just like, almost like, I was just going to say, it's almost like an alcoholic, they have one beer and it's just like, oh, okay. Maybe a better way of describing, somebody who smokes cigarettes, right? They have a cigarette and it doesn't even affect them. They're just doing it to almost get to normal. This guy, he wasn't doing it to get to normal, but it doesn't have that like effect on him. So after I like get all my, drain my face of any mucus, I lay down and I just start getting hot. Like, I take off all of my clothes except for my pants. Everyone's in their like winter or like cold gear, and I'm naked. And the guy who had taken Rapé, he's like, warm, Jake? And man, I just felt this intense burning in my knees. I don't know, I haven't really looked up the significance of what the knees mean. I think what it means for me is if whenever I've hurt my knee, it's because I'm almost walking this, especially my left knee, I'm walking this path that is like really off my path. And I believe it's good, but my body's almost telling me, no, man, like this is not the right way. Instead of sometimes it's necessary to just figure things out, right? Like, oh, okay, this is good for me, but this is good for me to learn, but it's not what I'm going to be doing forever, right? And one time when I had hurt my left knee, I thought, oh my God, of course, this is what I'm supposed to do. I hurt my knee. A few months ago, same thing happened. So, I don't know why, like there's just intense burning in my knees, but I've done enough emotional cleansing, shadow work, timeline work, inner child work, whatever the fruity term of the day is. I've done enough of that to realize that it's all temporary. This pain is gonna pass. So I kind of just felt into it. Like I put all my awareness into my knees until it slowly started to fade away. And I mean, I was probably like that for an hour because he had finished going through the circle, and then he prepares the ayahuasca. He like blesses it, does all this other stuff, and then he went around the entire circle, and he takes a couple minutes just to serve one person. Or each person has to go and like they hold the ayahuasca, and then they kind of sit with it, and then they drink it, and then they go lay down, and then the next person comes up and da-da-da. It's a process. So that was probably like an hour from the time I took the rapé until the time I took my ayahuasca, an hour and a half, and I was still affected by the rapé. It was still like my body hadn't recovered yet. So I took the ayahuasca, and like looking at my notes here, like I said, it was underwhelming this first night because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how long it would take, da-da-da-da. And the only thing that's happened is in my mind's eye, I could imagine, like I said, these big worms that were probably like, they were thicker than my thumb. Just like, and multiple of them. There were probably like 50 worms in a big bundle like this. When I say worms, they're almost like parasites. They're not like wiggling. They're just like these parasitic tubes almost that were coming out from my, like right here and like coming out of this area. And something that I didn't ask, but probably would have been a good idea considering the third night, is what do these worms mean? Or what does this mean? And maybe I'll tell you about the third night, because what had happened is the second night was like a full ayahuasca experience. The third night, he ran out of ayahuasca. The shaman ran out of ayahuasca, right? He had brung it from overseas, and they can only take so much, and maybe someone else in the group had paid for another night, or maybe some people took more than he had expected, and whatever, they ran out of ayahuasca. So the experience that I had on the third night was very similar to the first night, which is I didn't see the parasitic worms come out, but I could ask questions in my head, and immediately in my mind's eye I would see a symbol. And let me see if I wrote the question down. Okay, so I had two main questions, and because I had kind of solved a lot from the second night, so on the third night I kind of had two questions that I had forgotten to ask. And they were both about relationships with girls that I had relationships with, and kind of like what to do. And one thing that's very important is we get what we ask for. So I didn't ask, oh, what should I do about my relationship with this person? Instead, I asked, what would be the best thing? What would be the best step for me to take, or the best thing for me to do for our relationship? Right? And that doesn't mean like forever. A relationship is a series of relatings, which is exchanges of energy, if you want to call it that, or sharing of energy. So I asked that question, what's the best thing for me to do for my relationship with, we'll just say, person A? And in my mind's eye, the thing that popped up was, it was an image of a butcher's knife, right? And that might not mean anything to you. It might mean that, oh, you're gonna murder, right? But the thing is, that symbol was for me, right? So I knew, with all my experiences, what their interpretation was meant to be. And it was to immediately sever or cut ties with that person, to cut communication. Just don't do anything else. And ironically, I think a few weeks later, a few months later, I had, or not ironically, just mistakenly, foolishly, because I didn't listen to the advice, is I had sent this person almost like a final message. And of course, nothing that would be considered as positive or good came out of that message, right? Because ayahuasca told me, like, just stop, man. And so, second person, I asked the same thing. Okay, what's the best thing? What's the next step, or the best thing for me to do for my relationship with this person, person B? And it just showed an image of a boot. And I was like, what? Like, that doesn't seem so useful. Like, give him a boot or what? So then I literally, in my mind, I asked, could you give me some more information? Boom, immediately. Symbol of a compass. I swear to God. And so then, like I said, it's my interpretation. I immediately knew what to do. That meant to orient myself towards her and take a step towards her. That's what that boot was for, right? Compass was for orientation. The boot was to take a step towards her. And so I sent her a message. And it wasn't... Now, a lot of people might be thinking, oh, did you get back together with her? That's not the point, right? If someone is like clinging to this hope, oh my God, I want to do that. Well, I did get a benefit out of it. Just contacting her naturally, right? It's not like I wouldn't contact her and say, hey, I took this plant medicine and I saw a vision that it wasn't a vision of me talking to you. It's a vision of a boot and a compass. And that means I'm supposed to, that would just be ridiculous. So the point is to act naturally, right? Just act like, oh, okay, of course I would contact this person, because I actually like communicating with them, and it's healthy. And so I reopened kind of conversation with her, and we had some good exchanges, and I had gotten some good advice from her. Some like really important advice that was for me, right? We just have this, for some reason, I don't know how, maybe it's a soulmate or a twin flame, but she just knows what to say, and it hits me and it lands well for my spiritual growth. So that was night 3. Nothing else happened in night 3. I just eventually I fell asleep. But that's another thing that happened. I don't know how everyone else felt, but like if I would close my eyes and I wouldn't be almost like engaging with the environment or thinking or working my mind, I fell asleep. And then each morning I woke up almost at exactly 5 a.m. after the ceremony, right? We started about 9, and then after all the, I don't want to say hoopla, but after all the ceremonial stuff, we'd probably end taking ayahuasca at 10, and then, there's kind of this big thing, and then I'd wake up at 5, whatever happened. So now I'm going to start night 2, which was the full experience. Night 2, I purposely did not take Rapé because, like I said before, all of the stuff that I went through the first night. So I didn't take Rapé. And by the way, the taste of ayahuasca it's almost like there's 2 layers to it almost. There's a top layer which tastes like, I don't want to say rotten, but just like alcohol, right? It's just like this, like bad schnapps is the best description I can give. And then there's a bottom layer which is almost sediment. It's like dirt that just settles there. So that's like the taste that comes in. And for me anyways. So I'd taken, I took a full dose and I wasn't feeling anything, so I took another one or like a half one, or I went back. And what was happening is like other people were getting into their experiences before I was really like feeling anything. And that was kind of my signal about to go back. And I'm glad I did, because now I know what it feels like. And here's what it feels like to me, just so everyone, if you've never taken it before and you want to get an idea. So the sensation that started happening is like this tingling kind of started in my chest and stomach area. It was like this light tingling, almost like a massage tingling. And then that started to spread all over my body. And I started to giggle. I was like, this is what it feels like. I knew it was working, right? And I was so, like, I was like this kind of excited that that this was how it was feeling, and I knew it was working. And so I started to giggle. I'm looking at my notes here. And, important point. Before I started to giggle, like I said, everyone was starting, and I was almost like, hey, when do I get to join the party? Like, I asked that in my head. And I asked that, and literally within moments, my jaw just started to have this, like this, intuitional stretching is what I would call it, right? Where like I just knew that my jaw to go like this. And people sometimes when they take LSD, they'll have that same, what would that be called? Response, maybe? Intuitional response? Impulse. But it's not like this, oh, I want to get this gum impulse. It's just like an intuitional impulse. And so I said, when do I get to join the party? My jaw started going like this, and I recently discovered why that is, or probably why, is because in our body we have these meridian channels, which are what acupressures use to determine, where to put their needles or points, and a lot of them end in the jaw. So I think that there's a tendency that, if a lot of that channel is getting stuck somewhere, there's a tendency where it gets stuck in the jaw. So I started to go like that. Started to stretch my jaw. And then that's when these tingling started. And I was like, oh, the giggles. And I call that feeling, I just named it myself, the mother's embrace. Because it's almost like now she's ready to accept me. And at the end of that tingling, like the culmination of it, some people, like, I didn't feel nauseous, but it could happen because that's what's to induce the purging, which is where the ayahuasca collects all those parasites, vacuums them into the stomach, and then they vomit out. Now, if you are uncomfortable with what the vomiting was like, then I'll tell you in a moment before I tell you. But yeah, I vomited, and it was almost like, it's not like that type of vomit where it just like suddenly comes up and it's just like uncontrolled. It's almost like, oh, okay, now it's time to vomit. And I grab my bowl and just, like, no one had an accident where the vomit suddenly just came out and, they got it on themselves. That doesn't happen. It's almost like there's an intuitional knowing, like, oh, okay, now it's time to vomit. Just grab my bowl and start vomiting. And now I'm going to tell you what it felt like. So you can check the description or skip forward. What it felt like was like that same taste that was going down, that like disgusting schnapps came out first, and then afterwards it was like the sediment was like crawling up and along my tongue into my bowl. That's literally what it tasted like. So I'm gonna skip to what happened after the vomiting. So I finished vomiting, and my mom taught me really well because everyone else, they vomited, then they just lie back down and they start doing their processing, their whatever's going on in their experience. Me, I'm like, no, like, I'm not gonna have vomit next to me while I do this. First of all, it's like, anyways, yeah, it wasn't something that I would allow. So I got all my clothes on, and then I took my vomit, and then I made a mistake. I threw it in the outdoor toilet, the compost toilet. Right. My friend told me later that it's important to put it into a tree, like at the base of a tree, so then it can almost go back into the earth. And so I threw it in the toilet, and then when I did that, even before my friend had told me to put it under a tree, I was like, oh no, I just threw the sacred vomit in the toilet. I literally thought that in my brain, the sacred vomit. And I was like, I realized I thought I made a mistake or I did something bad because I threw the sacred vomit in the toilet. And then I was like, And then I made another, oh no, people are gonna shit and piss on top of my sacred vomit. Like, I literally had that idea in my head that it was like bad that people were going to, desecrate my vomit. But I literally thought of it as sacred vomit, right? Because it's a sacred plant medicine, and I mean, really it is, and that's why my friend, I told her the same story that I'm telling you. She told me, oh yeah, you put it under a tree. So anyways, I clean myself up in the bathroom, and then I go into pee into the stream. And as I'm doing it, I look up, and the trees, they were literally looming down over me. And I could just, it's all feeling, right? It's all my interpretation, my feeling. So the thing was, I didn't feel any fright. It wasn't like a horror. I didn't feel any horror. I was more like this respect. I had this respect for them because they were telling me, we're watching you. That was what I received. We're watching you. Actually, we're watching you as a warning. And I'm not someone who's just throwing, littering, or discarding stuff. I'm already someone who's quite conscious turning off the lights. I don't leave vehicles running. I don't, I'm one of my things is actually, if there's spare food, I want to eat it because I don't want it to go to waste. So I already take care of the environment in that way, and I got this message, right? We're watching you. And it was really not about me. It was almost a message for humanity in a way. We're watching humanity. That was what the trees meant by you. And that's not something I just made up to kind of feel innocent or less guilty. It was just that, again, like I said earlier about the boot and the compass and the butcher's knife, that was what was communicated to me. That was what I was received. That was what I received. So I'm peeing in the streams, trees looming over me, and I didn't feel any horror, no terror, no fright, no fear. I had enough distance, I call it, where I've done enough, like I said, inner work where I know I knew it was to pass. I knew, I was in no danger. These trees aren't going to engulf me and throw me across the fort. Well, who knows? It could happen eventually. But I knew it wasn't going to happen then, right? It was just all what I'm to receive. So I was just completely neutral towards that message. But what actually happened is I started giggling because I was like, oh my God, this is all happening in my mind. I'm not saying anything out loud. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to tell my friend. And then I was in my head, oh no, I can't tell her until tomorrow because we're not talking during the ceremony. And then I thought, oh no, where's my sacred vomit bowl? So and then I remember that I left it in the bathroom. And then the way I felt, the experience of moving or walking around while on ayahuasca, it's almost like a drunkenness, but not a sloppiness. So the world is, it's not so easy to step, but I still could, right? I just, it was important to be more deliberate or intentional with where I was stepping. But inside, there's this nausea, right? Or this thing where the world is kind of not so balanced. And I mean, it kind of makes sense considering this is the vine to the soul, right? That's what this ayahuasca is called. So I get back, lying down. I'm not lying down yet. What I'm doing is I'm sitting up on the edge of my mat. Everyone else is lying down. And I'm blowing my nose to get the rest of this vomit, saliva, whatever, just to clear my sinuses. And as I'm doing it, I'm going, and as I'm doing that, the shaman, he's going around with this smoke, and he uses it to clear the air, and he goes, pew, pew, kind of makes that noise as a symbolic way of like clearing out the air. And as he's going, pew, I went at almost the same time, and I thought, we should start an ayahuasca band, And then I kept making jokes in my head, right? Like I can't wait to tell my friend, get back, that we should make a band. And then I just start giggling and making jokes about jokes in my head, in my own mind. And I keep giggling and laughing. And the girl next to me, she starts to laugh that I'm laughing. Because one thing that's important is I did not try to control. I did not try to stop it. I did not think, oh my God, this, I'm supposed to be going to do some important stuff. I just let it go. And as it started to unravel into, it started to get a lot of momentum. The shaman, I could almost, the shaman, I could, this is really, it's like in my head, I could hear what he was thinking towards me about the laughter. It's almost that same thing where if you've ever been somewhere and someone kind of winks at you a certain way, right? Like there's a message. It's not just a physical wink. There's a message in that wink. Or like how a mom can just she intuitionally knows that her baby is crying. She can just, maybe her husband snores and we're snoring right next to her, but then her baby, she just hears this small, and she can almost feel that. And she gets up and goes to care for it. Or a dog, right? They can kind of just feel when we're feeling bad because there's something being communicated there. And there was something, it was like we were, right? What happens if we're going to get into the biology of it or the biochemistry is that, right, so much percentage of communication is body language. And there's an energy, if someone was like this, you can feel that. Not only can you see the energy, but you can almost feel there's some tension. This is a bad energy here, right? So it's almost like there was such a purity and a clarity in this circle, in this ceremony, that I could receive those messages. And so this happened with multiple people. The shaman, in my mind, and I actually confirmed this the next day with the people. I didn't go to them and ask them. They came to me and told me. So, sometimes we can kind of gut lead somebody in the direction we want. I didn't do that. They came to me and told me what their experience was and verified what was going on in my head. So the shaman, he was thinking towards me about my laughter. This is supposed to be a serious thing. And in my mind, I immediately responded, this is Mother Ayahuasca. This is what she intends. I'm not doing anything. I'm just allowing. After that, he didn't say anything. The next day, the translator told me that same thing, that, okay, yeah, the shaman realized that the laughter was actually a good thing. It kind of like stirred up all this clogged energy that was sitting around hovering above us, and allowed it to kind of get out of there, clear out, so that, more could come out. We could each go deeper with ourselves individually or as a whole. And so I was still laughing, right? And this shaman, and then I laid down and I was still laughing, and I kept laughing so much. And the participant next to me, this girl, she started laughing that I was laughing. And she almost had this witch's cackle laugh, like, or it was it was like a witch's cackle. And that's what then I started laughing about her laugh. Not what she was laughing at, just at her laugh. And eventually that kept momentum going and more, and she probably felt that I was laughing at her laugh because she kept laughing, and then her partner started laughing. Eventually everyone in the whole circle was laughing. Nothing was said, everyone was laughing. So that's just, it's almost incredible unless you're experiencing it, or unless you've experienced it. And after it's almost like a tide, right? It comes in and then it eventually went out, and the laughter died down. Physically, there was only so much I could laugh before my gut was just like exhausted. That's how hard and much I was laughing. And at the end of this, when this tide of laughter went out, my friend said, "Jacob, you're the best." You had to be there. And eventually what happened is I just started laughing again. There was nothing, I wasn't trying to laugh. It was just what was happening. And I don't even know if I was making jokes this time. And eventually one of the guys, he started knocking on the wood, like doom, doom, doom. In a way, and again, I knew he was the message that I received from him, that he verified the next day. He just came to me and told me, was that he wanted me to stop laughing because it was distracting him from his processing. And the message that I communicated, subconsciously or in my mind back to him was, maybe it's not a big deal. Not everything is a problem that needs to be solved. That's what I communicated to him. The next day he verified. He came to me and told me, yeah, I was pounding, because I thought you were disturbing my processing, and then I just realized, it's not even a big deal. I could just let it go. He told me that the next, one time, maybe a coincidence. 2 times, I'm not trying to convince anyone. I know what I experienced. So, eventually, he was going, oh, and in my mind, I thought I was judging him a little bit. I was like, dude, this isn't even a big deal, right? I almost took what I had said earlier about, when I was laughing, and I said like the moment I said this isn't a big deal, the moment I thought it, right? Didn't say anything. The moment I thought it, like I just had this, almost like this zap in my head, like my mind's eye, like it was a bzz, and like this flashing, and it was my interpretation was Mother Ayahuasca was telling me like, hey, don't judge. Like you're not here to judge people. You don't know what they're going through. Like they've got their own stuff. And now that I think about it, there's almost a distinction to make between when I was laughing and saying maybe it's not a big deal, right? That's a question versus, dude, quit, the judgment. Right, so there is a difference there, whereas like the first time I offered him a solution, like, hey, maybe it's not a big deal, versus the second time where I was like, yeah, almost like I was above him, like, you dude, quit being a pussy, blah, blah, blah. And again, this is all, I'm not trying to convince anyone. This is just what I experienced. So if you find this useful, then I encourage you to or take what is useful and then let go of the rest. Now, as far as compared to the third night where I actually had I could ask questions and I had those symbols, the second night, during this experience, I had forgotten to ask those questions. It's almost like, if you've ever been intoxicated, excuse me, what we do in one state and intending when I got into that state was different than when I got out of it, or when I got into the state, right? Like I'd intended to solve these problems or to like navigate, but once I got into the state, it's like someone who's drunk, like they might feel like they're gonna do something, and then before they're drinking, and then once they're drunk, they don't end up doing that thing because of their state, their motivation changes, their motor skills change, right? What happens before, what the intention is going into the experience doesn't mean that action is going to happen once you're in the experience. So that's something to think about is, when I do it again, I'm really going to kind of set my mind up, get contextual, and almost have an outcome that I want to have. Like imagine the outcome that I'd like to have after the experience. So then my Mother Ayahuasca can kind of fill in the details. And that's what I did with creating these questions, right? Okay, Mother Ayahuasca, here's what I want the questions to be answered at the end of it. So you just going to provide the answers. And like I said, I allowed that to happen. And so the last kind of 3 things that happened is, I think there's 3. Yeah. Last 3 things is, there's actually 4. So I'm gonna, excuse me. One thing, I'm gonna kind of end at the best thing, right? So the first thing is that this pergola that we're laying under, I almost felt like it was like pressing down on us, like it was about to like come like down on top of me, like it was just closer than it was, right? And I felt almost like I was about to get suffocated, but then I think what I did is I just let it go in a way, like, I almost had to reason myself out of like, okay, I know it's okay. It's not actually pressing down on me. If I focus on it, if I focus on that fear, it might get spiral into worse and create a neurosis, right? So I just kind of like, okay, and then I let it go. And then that was done for that. And then what I did is I would look like this, because we're laying down, so what if I went like that? I could see the tree line upside down, but I could see them. And it felt like the trees were an army, like almost like they're ready to charge. And this was like another warning from Mother Nature that she could overrun us if she really wanted to, humans. And a kind of lesson I heard recently is that humans, I kind of thought of most of this myself, but humans tend to forget that we came out of nature. We are of Mother Nature. We were birthed out of Mother Nature. When we kind of, it's so easy to think that we try to control her, or that Mother Nature is doing something to us as a separate, distinct thing, where in fact we are of Mother Nature. And so that's how I kind of view, it's an ingrained, embedded program in the way I operate, is that, it's not just a fancy quote, it's a way, okay, wow, like, it's important that we are intended to be in harmony with Mother Nature, because we are Mother Nature, so it's actually a way of being in harmony with ourselves. Yeah, that's another thing, is with the roof. It was like kind of slanted and curved, and it felt like it was starting to almost envelop us, like come down and around. But again, I just said, okay, just visions, just Mother Ayahuasca teaching me something, let it go. And then finally, after like the laughter, these were the kind of things that were happening after the laughter. And then like the very last thing, and this was like quick, like this wasn't after it, it's taken me a few minutes to tell you these things, but I mean, these were like moments where I just like looked up, oh, this thing is, oh, I'm just gonna let it go, okay. Oh, this thing is enveloping us, oh, okay, no, oh, okay, I'll just let it go. Oh, the trees look like they're storming at us, wow, okay. It was like that. After this, kind of the climax was, I just felt this intense, wow, even right now I can almost feel like inklings of it, just this intense bliss. Yeah, I mean, better than sex, better than orgasm, better than any food. It was just like, and it came from my midline, like almost from my gut, and rose, kind of came from here, and then it rose up, and it was a very, almost like white, intense energy that kind of, yeah, it was almost like it started in my gut, and then it rose up as a single line of intense. It was deepest in my gut, most intense, I could say, so brightest, and then it kind of rose up into about, it got slimmer and less intense as it was rising up, and it kind of, I would say it kind of stopped about right here, somewhere around here. And it was just this intense, white light of bliss with a feeling of intense blissness. And wow, it lasted, it felt like it lasted 2 minutes. This euphoria, this, yeah. And as it was culminating, coming to an end, this was the only thing I said out loud, and I whispered it. I just said, wow, everyone should feel this way. Like, feeling in a way that meant like everyone should be able to feel this good. So yeah, that's kind of, I didn't realize it would be this challenging to say that, or to think about that. Yeah, it's, I don't know what, oh yeah, it's just kind of heavy for me right now. Anyways, I thank you for watching. I appreciate your attention. I'm just intending to end this video as soon as possible, because just so I can probably sit with myself and amplify that feeling and kind of dive into what that whole experience has brought up for me. So I appreciate you watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below.